Start your morning with the mighty taste of King Kong Crunch, the only cereal with the strength of a giant ape in every bite. Packed with banana flavored clusters, chocolate boulder bits, and jungle marshmallows, King Kong Crunch is a part of a balanced breakfast that smashes hunger like an airplane. But that's not all. Check out these new wild flavors only the bravest breakfast warriors can endure. Volcanic Mango Mayhem, a tropical blast with chunks of fruit shaped like lava rocks and just a slight hint of edible ash. Roaring Peanut Butter Crunch. Every bite has a 30% chance of actually moving for reasons we don't yet understand. Coconut Cave Crunch. Made with real pieces of cave, like actual geological fragments. Yeah, we're talking about rocks, but it's weirdly good. And introducing our most intense flavor yet, Skull Island Surprise. The surprise is one of the marshmallows screams when you bite into it. King Kong Crunch starts as a cereal, it ends as a legend. Welcome to Movie Postmortem, where we dissect films of all kinds, whether they're good, bad, or those guilty pleasures we just can't quit. I'm Reggie Hill, and I'm joined by my nephew Isaiah Brown. Together, we're here to examine what worked, what didn't, and why we keep coming back for more. So grab your popcorn because no movie is safe from the scalpel on Movie Postmortem. Thanks for joining us today. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Kong, Skull Island, the second film in the Monsterverse universe that came out in 2017. And so, Isaiah, you picked this film, so tell us why you wanted us to discuss this today.
Yes, there's actually a very good reason why I wanted to do this movie today. Number one, I thought you had already owned it. Number one. And number two, the last episode that we did before this one was Zilla. And so I wanted to enjoy a monster movie again.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is a great palate cleanser of a film, and I can tell you that I did remedy that mistake of not actually owning a physical copy of this film. I now own it on Blu-ray, and it is well worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, this movie is really good.
So let me start off with a description of the film. This film tells the story of Kong, who lives on Skull Island. It's set in America in 1973, where we see a team of scientists who want to explore this strange new island that they believe has lots of secrets. And the scientists trick a military expedition into helping them go to Skull Island. There, they encounter Kong and lots of other creatures that live on this hidden island. And it quickly evolves into a race to see whether or not they can actually survive this expedition to make it back to tell the tale of everything that they saw there.
Actually, I had another reason for picking this movie too is because out of all the MonsterVerse movies, this is my comfort one to watch.
Yeah, I actually thought that. Like, I think this might actually be the best of the MonsterVerse film.
But like, it's funny because like when you look at MonsterVerse overall, you've got the very low point that was Godzilla 2014, and you have the rest of the sequels that were a whole lot better than 2014. But even so, I still like to go watch this one more.
Yeah, I would argue that the MonsterVerse would not have been successful without this film. I think that it is far better than Godzilla 2014, and I think it's actually better than a lot of the films that came after it. And I think there's a lot of debate about whether or not Kong took on too much of a role in the MonsterVerse compared to Godzilla, but I don't think you
well,
can deny that this is a really good film.
well. Here's the thing. Here's something to reconsider, pretty much, because after the disaster that was Zilla, Tohei or Toho, one of the names of the companies, and that pretty much the people that are in charge of Godzilla over Japan, they gave us a whole lot of rules, pretty much, with what we could do with Godzilla. But we don't have those rules with Kong, so we can do what we want with him.
Yes. That's the really fun thing about King Kong. He's American. And interestingly enough, the novel for King Kong is public domain. So anybody can make a Kong story, kind of however you want. And so this film, takes a very different approach. We'll talk about that as we get into our discussion of the film.
Yeah,
And so let's start off with our ratings. What would you give the film out of 5 stars?
it's funny. I don't have it in me to hate this movie. I give this a 4 stars out of 5. I can't bring myself to bring it lower.
That's funny. That's exactly the same score I would give it. This is a good movie. It's very entertaining. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. This movie, and I'll just put this up front right now. I don't have a lot of cause of death for this film, so this will be mostly my cause of celebration and one or two brief script stitch ups. And so, yeah, we can kick off with our cause of celebration. And like you
Yeah.
said, Samuel Jackson. He's
Yeah.
just fantastic in this film.
This is that period where they were still able to cast him in good roles.
Yeah, and I think the thing that makes this really good, you have Samuel Jackson in this film as a Colonel Packard. This is set after the Vietnam War. The
Yeah.
Vietnam War is basically just ended. You get the idea. This is a guy who was unhappy that America essentially surrendered. He wished they would have kept fighting, and he becomes Captain Ahab, like in Moby Dick. When he encounters Kong, he has an adversary that he's going to do whatever he can to take down. He's not going to back away from this fight. He's not going to lose. He's a man who's kind of fed up with losing war, and Samuel just plays this character to perfection.
Yeah, we cannot not be political in terms of this movie because this is literally the Vietnam War here. Like one of the biggest like politically funded wars that pretty much happened in American history. And no matter your opinion of the Vietnam War, the fact of the matter is, it was a war that we did not have to fight. Samuel Jackson's character, he does not care. It was a war, and losing was something that he just could not accept, both with Kong and in Vietnam.
Yeah, and I would say that was one of the smartest decisions in terms of where the film was set and when to make it a war film like this. Vietnam, you could argue again, is a war that we couldn't win because of how we had to fight it. It was a war set on someone else's homeland, in their country, in their territory.
Yeah,
Occupation wars, very difficult. So Packard
it's
just lost a war like that, and he's going to try to fight and win a war just like that against a giant, gorilla.
yeah, it's funny because like the whole Vietnam War flashbacks memes that exists for a reason. Any of you listeners out there, spend a good 30 minutes researching what actually happened in Vietnam, and you will understand why every one of their mom was like, "Yeah, we can't do this anymore."
Yeah. And so I love that. I love the obsessive nature of his character. Like I said, he really is Captain Ahab and Moby Dick. He's obsessed once he encounters Kong with finding him, killing him. He doesn't really care what happens to the men. He just wants to kill this adversary because that's what his life is all about. It's
Yeah,
about war fighting. It's about that purpose of battle. And he sees Kong as like this big challenge. He can kind of redeem himself for like the loss that he suffered, vicariously in
yeah.
the US leaving Vietnam.
Yeah, well, I believe the biggest red flag about our character, Captain Ahab, here is that he has a bobblehead of Nixon. That's the biggest red flag you can have there.
Yeah, and so he leads a group of what are they called? Like kind of air chopper, reconnaissance or
Yeah,
military aerial unit. I'm not sure exactly what they're.
doesn't matter too much, but they have a name. How about that?
Yeah. And so when the film kind of shows that Monarch are, secret organization that has been kind of trying to study and prove the existence of these
Yeah,
Titan type monsters like
they're
Godzilla.
they don't have the massive amount of resources they have in King of the Monsters and Kong Skull Island. Not no wait, this is Skull Island. I meant Kong New Empire. This is Monarch still in their infancy, pretty much.
Yes.
They
And
have to do
so
they have to do things by the book. They have to get deals made in order to do anything. And so it was an uphill battle just for them to go to Skull Island.
Yes, and so in many ways, they needed a character like the one Samuel Jackson portrays in order to do this. You need somebody who's obsessed with fighting because him and his soldiers, they can just go home. They can go back to the States, the war is over, but he doesn't want to do that. You get the
Yes.
idea. This guy hates the idea of going home and just being at peace. So they want to go into this kind of uncharted, potentially dangerous environment because he thrives on that.
Yeah, and that's also another cause of celebration here, pretty much, because I'm so used to just generic military soldiers, pretty much. But here's the thing: for the living soldiers that survive after the Kong attack, they all aren't, even though they're listening to him because he's their commander, they're still questioning him. Like, this isn't a terrible idea. Just like, don't you miss your bed, man? I miss my bed. We could have been home.
Yes. And that's where I felt that the story was, like you said, very smart. This, much like Moby Dick, you have people who are like, look, Captain Ahab is taking us a place we don't need to go. He's losing it, right? So you don't see people just blindly following him. You see people in various stages of rebellion, sometimes open rebellion against the things that he's telling them to do. Even if they have the chain of command, you do see people questioning his decisions. And once he gets to a point where he's so obsessed with it, you see people saying, look, I'm pulling back. I'm not going to follow you anymore. Samuel does a great job in this film just because of the natural acting talents that he has, and he has such a great expressive face. You have to get the idea that this is a guy that people will follow because he can be very nice and friendly, but he could also just intimidate you with just a stare. And what I kind of wrote down in my notes watching the film was that Samuel just has a great look where he can always look just pissed off, just without even saying anything. Just his eyes can just show you, I'm really pissed off right
Yeah,
now.
it's funny you say that because I actually took note of this in my head while I was watching it. Where's the scene? There's the scene where after they regroup from Kong attacking them, he's talking to John Goodman. He's like, "Hey, how you doing? You all right? Cool? You cool?" He just sits downstairs. Someone just aims a gun at them, and there's no music at all. It's just Samuel L. Jackson being intimidating.
Yep, and like that's all you need. He's one of the most intimidating actors when like those types of moments, and he does a great job
Yeah, and
here.
again, that's him intimidating John Goodman.
Yes. Yeah, this film has like great actors all around, and we'll talk about them probably more as we get through the story. But I think actually that's one of the things that made this such a good film. So you have, Samuel Jackson as, this pilot who is really the Captain Ahab of the story. You have Tom Hiddleston as James Conrad, like a British SAS officer who was their tracker, who was, designed to kind of help them figure out where they need to go on the island. Brie Larson is Mason Weaver, a war photographer, who I like the kind of dynamic she had with Samuel Jackson's character because he's like, oh, great, a war photographer. You're one of the people who turned the public against us in the war. And
I was just
so,
like, well, first of all, Sergeant.
yeah. So he's a person who hates, the fact that anybody knowing about what the reality of war is really like, he just hates the press. He hates free press and all that. You have John Goodman as Bill Randa. He's one of the founders of Monarch. As we say in this point in the story, Monarch does not have money. You get the idea. He's lying to everybody in order to kind of serve his own agenda. You have Corey Hawkins as Houston Brooks, a scientist friend of Bill Randa, who, supports this theory of a hollow earth where all of these titans and other things, kind of
Yeah,
hang out.
it's funny.
And
Like, no matter your opinions on the interesting theory of Hollow Earth, that's what we have with this. That's what we have with this franchise. So deal with it.
yeah, and I would say that's how you can tell how good this movie is. You know how much I hate conspiracy theories and the whole nonsense about a hollow earth. I don't mind it in this film. That's how good the film is. And also, I think one of the best additions to the cast and the story, John C. Riley as a Lieutenant Hank Marlowe, who was stranded on Skull Island in like 1942
Yeah,
and was stranded there for 28 years.
yeah,
And then the expedition comes upon him and he kind of is there, welcome
yeah,
welcome crew to the island. He tells them everything they need to know about
yeah.
life on Skull Island.
I loved his character in this movie. He did the perfect amount of like, man, I've been stuck here for 28 years, and he wasn't overly campy or anything like that. But you could tell, like, and even if he is overly campy, it makes sense considering the people he was stuck around with for 28 years.
Yes, exactly.
They literally do not talk.
Yeah, he's been stuck with people, but people who don't understand his language, and he's been away from home for almost 30 years,
Yeah,
having been stranded and marooned there with a person who was his enemy. So the film opens with Hank Marlowe and a Japanese fighter, pilot. They both crash on Skull Island, and then you kind of see Kong. So Kong kind of puts a stop to their fighting. You later learn that they, tried to get off the island, but they couldn't. And then Hank, once his friend, this Japanese pilot, his enemy became his friend. Hank has been stuck there for almost 30 years now, and he's
yeah,
got some, mental deficiencies at this point, but he is a very fun character.
yeah. Him and Gunpei. I wish we could have seen Gunpei alive, but
Yeah, I
man,
mean,
it's
just the
but
way,
that
like, he was very sentimental talking about gung painting. And I think that's the thing. Like, John C. Riley is a great comedic and dramatic actor, but and he brings both of that to the film. So when he talks about missing home, missing his wife and the son he's never seen, he brings the emotional beat. So he can bring the comedy and the emotion when necessary.
Yeah, and like this is the sad thing about war, pretty much. So where like he directly says in this movie, like, man, take away the uniforms, take away the planes, take away the war, and we be brothers.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing too in terms of the film starts in like 1940s, then it goes to 1973. You get to see how, John C. Riley's character, a, soldier from World War II, how he reacts to learning like, oh, great, the US has been in kind of continuing wars since then. So he asks the soldiers at one point, like, oh, did we win the war? And they're like, which one? He's like, yeah, that's typical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so like this isn't really that funny, but it made me laugh to where they're describing events to him. He's like, yeah, by the way, we put a man on the moon. He's like, really? What's he eating up there?
No, that was hysterical. I think that was designed to be hysterical. All of that whole section of the film made me laugh so much. You're like, really? They just left him there?
Yeah, because he did say we put a man on the moon. They
Yeah.
didn't. He didn't say we brought him back.
So yeah, him.
That's like in the same area code as like your Hoover Dam like fake commercial or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly. We just put a man on the moon and we left him there. So yeah, him learning like, wait, Russia was our ally. What do you mean we're in the middle of a Cold War? What does a Cold War mean? They only fight during the winter, but they take summers off. Like he does a great job with, those comedic moments of a guy who's completely out of touch with everything that's happened, like from a geopolitical standpoint in the last 30 years.
Yeah, and like we're kind of jumping all over the place here in regards to our cause of celebration, but that just speaks to how good this movie actually is. To where like
Yes.
you could talk about one thing about this movie that's good, and then you can segment yourself into like 16 other parts of what makes it even better.
Yeah, and when I looked at the cast, I was like, yeah, they have a really stacked cast. Like, this is the type of film that you don't necessarily need all of these actors. I would argue that you did because they all brought so much to their role that it works. And so, like, that's why I would say, like, when you mentioned, like, Samuel Jackson be the main cause of celebration, I would say, yes, definitely. And I would also say the cast overall because they all really work hard to bring some depth to these characters. There's some characters don't get fleshed out enough or some at all. We'll talk about that later. But
Yeah,
like in terms of Samuel Jackson, I really think he's the driving force of this film, where he is the Captain Ahab that you have to really become attached to as a character, and love him or hate him, you understand what's driving Colonel Picard.
yeah, and it's funny because like even though he was that one black guy, even though his job was just being the iron surrogate, he did pretty okay being the iron surrogate because he pretty much said exactly everything that I think every time I watch this movie.
Yeah, and that's what you need. You need kind of those grounded moments to not necessarily just lighten the mood, but to bring that sense of reality from the outside perspective to the film. And I think that's one of the things that I like that they do that several times in the film. And it doesn't necessarily feel quippy, it feels real. Like after Kong's initial attack, where he just decimates all the helicopters
Yeah,
that
and
everybody's traveling in.
he's just there on the ground while yeah. There's the scene where the guy's eating. And he's like, "How you have an appetite after that, man? We just got attacked by something that we've seen in a storybook."
And then the guy Cole who's just eating, he's like, "Yeah, that was an unconventional encounter. I don't know what to
Yeah.
tell you. Like we
He's
didn't
just
set
like
no precedent
because
for that."
yeah, because you and me, we are both like stands of Bigfoot and whatnot. So like we would be just like that if something like that happened. Just like you do you not understand what just happened? He was like, "Yeah, it happened." And dude,
I loved how that phrase. Yeah, that's an unprecedented tactical situation. We did the best we could. Like it was just like, yeah,
yeah,
okay. But the cast is just phenomenal. So yeah, I would wrap Samuel Jackson is definitely the lead, which is funny. I kept thinking about like who is the lead of this story. I would actually consider Samuel Jackson the lead. It is an ensemble
yeah.
cast.
Most of the here's the thing. Most of this story revolves around him being this gung ho war like guy, and so pretty much the funny thing is the story could have ended like an hour in the movie if he just gave up.
Yes, but you understand that he won't, and I
Yeah,
think that's the thing. Like he doesn't start the story, but I feel like he's the main character because he drives the story. So yeah, definitely like big cause of celebration. I can't say enough about Samuel Jackson in this film.
here's a next cause celebration for me with this movie. Even though I've watched this movie, I don't know how many times because this is just my comfort movie when I just can't think of anything to watch. The action in this movie is still pretty good to where even if you know what's going to happen, you're still tense a little bit. I think my favorite action segment, just as a whole overall during this movie, is just the scene where Kong is attacking the helicopters.
Yes, I absolutely love the direction of this film. which is strange because I looked up the director, his name is Jordan Vogt Roberts. He hasn't done anything that would indicate that he could do this. And he really hasn't done anything after this. And so like this is just a spectacular film, and his vision, the visual, lens, the cinematography that he kind of put into this film is just amazing. And like that's where I said sometimes you can't tell who could just be a visionary in terms of how they can make films because it just looks stunning. And the action scenes, like you mentioned, like that's such a great moment. You see the helicopter crew, they're supposedly doing seismic mapping of the island. They're dropping bombs in order to map the hollow earth and all this.
Yeah.
It's very picturesque setting.
Moral and ethical complaints aside, that is a thing that does work. It's a thing that we should rely on, but it does work. It is a quick way to map out islands and pretty much map out seismic activity, whatever the heck. Still wouldn't. It's still not anything I would agree on. I would just, me personally, I would just pick up a map and just go by foot and map everything. But you know what? You do you.
Yeah, and they show this very nicely, this contrast where it's like the peaceful, calm island. You see animals, you're just running from these explosions, and the people in the helicopters like, yeah, we're cool, we're kicking butt here. And then all of a sudden a tree goes like hurtling through the cockpit of one of the
Yeah.
helicopters, and then they're upon Kong. When Kong initially attacks these helicopters, it's great. It happens so fast. It happens faster than you would think. They don't really get on the island more than 5 minutes, and then Kong attacks them. And it's very just shocking. It's very intense. You see a lot of it from the perspective of the people in the copters where they can't even see Kong. You just see that a hand or a mouth, and it's just very destructive. And it just shows really how powerful he is. And yeah, this action scene is just really impressive. And one of the moments that I really like, and again, it shows kind of Packard, Samuel Jackson's character's motivation. Once his helicopter has been put to the ground by, Kong, he's trying to get one of his, friends, another soldier out, and he's trying to get the guy out of the copter. And then you just see the copter gets yanked off the ground, and Kong just flings it off into the distance. You see Packard just sitting there looking like in disbelief, like, that guy was alive and now he just got tossed, a quarter mile away. And you just really see him like taking it all in. Like, this is something I have never seen power like this. And you see just the rage in his eyes. He just doesn't say a word, but you understand that growing obsession he has with, I don't know what this is, but I have to kill it.
And I wish I remembered this speech word for word because it's such a good speech. Is the scene where he's pretty much explaining his reasoning for why he's still so gung ho about Kong. He's like, I just punched my microphone. Please cut that out later. It's the scene where he's like, we're soldiers. We do the dirty work here so our families and homeland doesn't have to worry about this. He's like, people should even know something like this exists. And he's like, sir, like, you can't kill Kong. He keeps the skull cars in check. He's like, we'll kill them too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, those moments, I really wrote those down too, because that shows how obsessive he is. It also shows his resentment of, Brie Larson's character, the photojournalist, because he's like,
Yeah.
no, nobody should even know the reality of war. He's like, we do the dirty work. It's people like you showing pictures of it. Nobody should even know what we do over here. He doesn't care. People are saying like, look, it's worse of it. His solution is like, I'm a hammer. I'm going to hammer my way through this problem. I don't care if you tell me, there's a bigger problem. I'll hammer that one too. So it just shows
Yeah.
he's obsessed. He's not thinking rationally. King Kong is actually one of my favorite stories. And I think I might have said this before. I would argue it's probably the best motion picture ever made because of when it was made and the original nature of the story. Since that film came out in 1933, what we've basically done is retell it exactly the same way over and over again.
Yeah,
The filmmakers,
even though this isn't just Kong goes to New York and he climbs the building with a white woman. Those plot points still almost happen, kind of.
no,
King Kong here saves Brie Larson for some reason.
no, but I wanted to say here, the thing I actually like is the filmmaker, when he was approached with this, and they were like, oh, we want you to do this. He was like, why? Like King Kong is a perfect story already. Why do you want me to remake it? I'm not going to remake King Kong. So this is actually, although there are the elements of the story that are there, this is by far the most different in my mind in terms of Kong never leaves the island. He doesn't die in the film like he does in every other one. This
Yeah,
is not a Beauty and the Beast story. You see him interacting with the, white woman, but it's not like, oh, he's not. given her by the natives. He saves her once in a way that I think it was just kind of like even unnecessary, honestly. And it's just a story that's about Kong. It's about something else. And the director's decision to say, like, yeah, this is a war story. We're going to tell a story set in the Vietnam War because it's a very interesting point in time for people rather than setting it in the, 1930s. I thought that that was the smartest decision because this gives it a very fresh perspective. It's not just the same Kong story. We found a gorilla on an island. We took him back, and it was beauty that killed the beast. It's not the story here. And I thought like that was actually a really big cause of celebration for me, is that it's not the same retelling of that story over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because this came out not, the most famous retelling of Kong before that was probably the Peter Jackson one. It was probably around 2005.
Yeah, the one that I still can't watch and all the way in one sitting.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing. Like this film had to distinguish itself from that one, and I think it did a really good job. Probably the biggest, cause of celebration for me in this film is that Kong is Kong in this film. Kong is not a gorilla. That's the thing I hate about Peter Jackson's film. He decided for some reason that King Kong is just a giant gorilla.
Yeah, and that one he's just a giant silverback.
Yeah, he's just a big silverback gorilla. That's not what King Kong has been from the beginning. Go back to 1933 film, which I would actually recommend people do. It's better than you might think it is. King Kong is not just a gorilla. He's a beast man gorilla, like kind of hybrid thing. He walks on two legs. He's bipedal. And so the first thing they had to decide to do for this film was to say, we're not going to retell that original story, and we're going to make Kong a monster again, not just a gorilla. And I think that's part of the thing that really makes this film work. Kong is a huge monster who looks like a god on the island. Making Skull Island itself full of like exotic, crazy, flora and fauna was something that was great to see again.
Skull Island is the definition of miss me with that BS. This island is scuffed. Just imagine just walking down just a dirt path and all of a sudden you just get picked up by a seagull and then you get ripped apart by a flock of seagulls. That's pretty much what this island is. Or just like you get bit by a mosquito and then you die 30 minutes later. Just this island sucks.
Yeah, I think everything, but maybe one creature they encounter, maybe two creatures don't kill people. But like the giant, like kind of water
Yeah,
buffalo that's like covered with moss, that doesn't intentionally kill anybody.
yeah, and there's that stick bug.
Yeah, the walking stick, the giant walking stick bug, it doesn't intentionally kill anybody. I think everything else on the island intentionally kills people. But like, yeah, it's very, first of all, it's visually, it looks impressive, and we'll get
Yeah,
to
it's
that later.
amazing.
But yeah, like it's a very just dangerous place, and you understand the biggest thing that I like about the way they depict Skull Island in this film. The giant wall on Skull Island is a part of every King Kong story. It's not just to protect the villagers from Kong. They're like, no, no, it's not designed to keep Kong out. It's designed to keep everything else out. We
Yeah,
actually don't mind Kong.
yeah, Kong's pretty good. Everything
Yeah.
else sucks. Here's a quick cause celebration here because I'm a big fan of animal like behaviors and things like that. That's the thing that I do. I give points to the skull crawlers because they do a good job for being intimidating and scary. But like even so, we're telling a story of just like giant monsters pretty much. They're intelligent, but they are still animals. And so here's why I'm bringing this up. I'm getting ready to talk about the scene that I think you know what I'm getting ready to say.
Yeah.
The 10 out of 10 self-sacrifice by that one guy.
I think that's a classic movie scene. Like it's
Yeah.
so well done.
Yeah, but here's the thing, because here's for those of you that don't remember, pretty much, it's been a while since you watched this movie. I'll tell you what, I can't remember his name. It doesn't really matter that much. But here,
Cole.
yeah, Cole. He was like, you know what, everyone else, you don't need to go because you're not gonna make it. You need someone to stop the monster. You need someone to slow him down, pretty much. And so he pulls every grenade he has and starts walking towards the skullcrawler, the big one, pretty much. He's like, "Go, live your life. I got this." And the skullcrawler kind of slows down, looks at him weird, like, huh, thing's funny. I want to eat this. And then slaps him into a melon.
Where he
So,
explodes in
yeah.
dramatic fashion. When people talk about kind of subverting expectations, I think most of the time films never actually do that. But this did one. It was like, okay, he's going to make a dramatic sacrifice, but it's completely upended by the creature realizing, nah, something's not right about this. It just swats him away.
Yeah.
That's just a great moment in the
And it's
film.
funny because, like, animal behaviors are pretty interesting, too. Because here's why I say this. Most predators, like skullcrawlers, have a predator response. And it's triggered when something starts running from them. our soldier here wasn't running. He was going right towards them. So the skull caller's probably thinking, something's not right with this one. I can't eat this. This is weird. Must be sick or something. Get away from me.
Yeah, and even beyond that, I think they do a good job in the story of establishing the humans, in some cases, mainly just Packard himself, are doing their best to antagonize everything on the island. Like they pointed out, the skull crawlers in Kong didn't come out until they started dropping explosive charges on the island. At one point, Packard is looking through his like scope of his rifle. It's a weird bat bird thing, and he just shoots it. And the gunshot sound
Yeah,
puts like hundreds of them in the air, which later come back and kill one of their party members. So it's
yeah,
like, yeah, they're antagonizing things that they don't even understand. They're in the enemy territory. They're the occupied force. Everything about this story is showing, through the parallel, storytelling. Like, yeah, this is just like Vietnam. This is a place. It's not your home. You don't belong here. You're not gonna survive here.
yeah. Pretty much for most of this movie, you can divide each group by two categories. You've got the tourists, the respectful tourists, and you've got the delinquents.
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
side, on one side, they're doing what they're supposed to and just making their way through the island, and the other side, they're causing as much trouble as possible, making things worse for them.
Kong himself, as we said before, he's not a gorilla. He's like a gorilla man monster hybrid.
Yeah,
So
and
he's
remember, like a few movies later, this guy understands sign language.
Yes, exactly. So you see him here. He's smart. He knows how to use weapons. I love the scene where he picks up this giant tree and he, breaks off the branches to make like a bat. At the end of
Yeah,
the film, he makes like a boat motor that he
yeah.
uses as like kind of a flail to like slice open the biggest,
Well,
skull crawler.
well, that's another thing. Like apes already are pretty intelligent creatures, but they take his intelligence and they bring it up.
I can tell that the filmmakers really thought about how Kong should behave, how Kong should look, how the creatures on the island should look. And it seems like a very simple point, but if you want to make a film, especially a film, like King Kong, when the time it came out in the 30s, was a technological masterpiece. If you're gonna do a King Kong film and not care about Kong, you shouldn't
Then
be
don't
making
bother.
one.
Yeah,
Don't bother. If you don't know about this character, don't bother. If you think Kong is just a giant gorilla, don't bother. Yeah, that includes you, Peter Jackson. Don't bother because you don't
yeah,
get it.
yeah. It's like if you're not gonna do the character right, don't bother. Looking at you, Emmerich.
Yeah. And so like just that showing like we're studying, animals in terms of how the skull crawlers should act, how they should move, how Kong should act. What would a monster gorilla man hybrid like Kong look like? How would he walk? The types of things he would eat, like that goes into why this film works so well. And it's kind of easy to say the visual effects, but like that goes into like how expressive his face is. Like he has more than the gorilla face. He has a very human-like face that works really well in many scenes because you can read the emotion in his eyes and in his, face as he's like dealing with whatever situation he's in. And it just shows that these filmmakers, they really cared about the property. So again, it doesn't matter if it's an IP that you think is tired or boring. If you care about it, you can actually make a great film. And I think this is a perfect example of that.
And so we've been going strong for pretty much a good 50 minutes now, probably. And so let's just take a quick pause to pay some bills, and we'll come back with probably more cause of celebration, or we'll round it off and go to our causes of death.
Do you thrive under pressure? Can you keep a secret even if it's the size of a skyscraper? Do you have no problem working in things like high radiation zones? Then Monarch is looking for you. We are the first, last, and only line of defense between humanity and the ancient city leveling giants we lovingly call Titans. At Monarch, we offer career paths in surveillance, containment, and monster related evacuation. Top of the line hazmat suits. Keep yours for free after 6 months. And of course, monster proximity pay. You'll work alongside some of the brightest minds in the field. And also Carl, who swears that Mothra once winked at him. Monarch. We can't control the Titans, but we can control the panicky humans running around outside around them. And we're back. So we have gushed about this film a lot, which is fine. It's a good film. And so, do you have anything that you would consider a cause of death? I'll just be honest. I don't have any causes of death for the film. I have some script stitch outs, but
Yeah.
I don't have anything to actually consider a cause of death.
I don't either, and I feel like my cause of death here is just kind of just like a nitpick, I guess. because the only thing I can think of that you could remove pretty much was Tom Hiddleston's bar fight that he had because he really didn't even need it.
And so for me, in terms of script stitch ups, the one thing that we kind of pointed out already was that this is a great ensemble cast. But when you have this many characters, what unfortunately inevitably happens is that you can't really flesh out
All
all
of
of
them.
their stories, really well. And I think there are just several cases where, because of the lack of time, and this is a relatively short movie, it finishes under 2 hours, we just don't know enough about most of the characters, and some we know nothing about at all. Dr. Lynn's character, we know nothing about. And so this is where, unfortunately, the behind the scenes stuff I think kind of bleeds into this film. At this point in time, most of these films were made for the international audiences. So China, it's a huge
Oh
box office
yeah.
potential. They're funding.
Is this still the year we were sucking up to China?
Yes, exactly. This is the year we were doing that. And so Tencent Productions from China funded a good portion of this film. So they want Chinese actors or actresses in the film. Not opposed to that. Great. The problem is she's a biologist who we don't really learn anything from. And it seems like if she had a role in the film, it's been cut to pieces because she's just kind of there in the background, occasionally saying things. You can't do this. I'm not opposed to having international actors or actresses in films. This is a biologist who should have been essential to the story at some point. You have to actually make her part of the story in a meaningful way. I would argue that if you need to have a character, like this in the film, make her the war photographer, at least because you don't have enough plot for this many characters. So this biologist who's kind of along for the ride with Brooks, our other kind of scientists, from Monarch, they don't really have enough to do. And so I just really felt that we needed something from Dr. Lin. She's supposed to be a biologist. I don't think at any point in the story did we actually even hear her say anything relating to the sciences going on in the island.
I feel like she could have been a character, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, and I feel really bad for the actresses from China because this keeps happening in the franchise. I'm trying to keep it focused in this film. But in the next film, King of the Monsters, they do this also with another Asian actress who's there with Mothra that you're like, wait, does she have a more prominent role? Because why does she keep showing up? But they don't really know what to do with her. And so like I feel like you see the beginnings of that problem here in this film where they're like, yeah, great. We'll put an actress in, but they don't even have anything for her to do. And I just felt like that is one failing of the script where they don't have her even discuss the biology that they're seeing or anything. So as you mentioned, you could cut the film in a couple of places, trim out a little bit of some other characters, kind of unnecessary exposition or background,
Yeah. And
and give it to her.
yeah, it's funny because this feels harsh to say, but if we weren't trying to impress China so much, she probably wouldn't even be in this movie.
No, again, that's 100% the reason that she's there, and I get it. But it's like you have to address that in the script. So give her something to do because like she literally has nothing to do in the story. She's just there. Which makes it kind of worse at the end where you see her kind of laying her head on Brooks' shoulder as they like head out. It's like, wait, was there like a budding romance between them that was
Because
cut? Because it's like there's
yeah,
nothing.
we only saw that one scene where he cut himself with that trying to get that can open, but that was
Yeah.
it.
So yeah, so it's like both of them are kind of done dirty, but Brooks at least has scenes before they get to the island where you kind of flesh out his character more. But if you didn't read like the MonsterVerse entry about who Dr. Lin is, you wouldn't even know who this woman is on the island. That's how bad her character has been chopped up in the film. So like I think that's something the script really needed to work on.
Yeah. It's funny because besides that, I don't have much for a stitch up here. I feel like most of this movie just works.
Yeah, like I said, like to me, like that was the biggest thing where it's so many characters and it's just such an egregious, moment where you realize like, wow, she really didn't have anything. One other slight kind of script stitch up I would have with Mason Weaver, Brie Larson's character. I felt that there was an arc building for her character where, she's the photojournalist. She wants to kind of find a, meaningful story out of all of this. And kind of at the end, when they've decided, like, okay, we're all going to go back to the mainland, and she just agrees with them, like, yeah, we're not going to tell anybody about this. I felt that that didn't make any sense to me from a photojournalist. That she
I
would be that quick to kind of go along with the let's just try to keep this a conspiracy again.
Yeah, yeah, it is funny though because in the post credit scene, I do like this where Tom Hill sings like, "I promise we won't tell the Russians," and she's like, "No, I will."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so like just for like one idea I kind of thought about was what if she again because they're bringing her into Monarch. What if she's using the photos she's taking to actually tell the story? Like, no, Kong is not this monster. Here is photographic proof number one that he exists and that he's not a threat. So I felt like that was a weird angle where they kind of left her story kind of just blowing in the wind. Where I felt like this is a photojournalist who wants to show the truth. The truth is that Kong is not a threat. Kong is something they should protect because again, you later see that Kong is essentially under the protection of Monarch and the government at that point. I would have imagined that her like photographs, her story would have done a good part of that. So I just kind of felt that that was something that would have changed to kind of say, yeah, show in that arc by saying her photos did something rather than say, like, yeah, I'll cover it up along with all of you.
Yeah, maybe that's something that got cut pretty much in the file
Yeah, like
copy of it.
I kind of felt like this film was probably something that might have been like 20 minutes longer, at one point in time, and they just cut a lot of it. And so in summary, if you like King Kong, I think you will love Kong Skull Island. It is a very fresh take on the King Kong story. It's a war story set in Vietnam, 1973, a very unique, script, unique director, visually impressive, great ensemble cast, and it's just fun and entertaining. I think that this is the perfect, kaiju, monster film, and I stick by my 4 out of 5 star rating.
Yeah, I'm sticking with it too. It's pretty good.
And so that's it for this episode of Movie Postmortem. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give us 5 stars because even bad podcasts deserve a good review. Remember, whether it's good, bad, or just a guilty pleasure, every movie deserves a postmortem. Thanks for listening.
And as always, hold on to your butts. We'll see you next time.